In 2019, research came out identifying a 30-year difference in life expectancy between the Inglewood community in Chicago and the Streeterville community in Chicago. There's so much in the middle of it around access to health care and food deserts and healthy food, educational attainment, economic mobility, the quality of housing, and so forth. Those things aren't gendered. But when you look at the data and the impact of the lack of those things, having those things reliably, we see a clear gender lens in the outcome. And actually, it's a gendered and racial lens. We need bold and innovative strategies to really address this growing generational, gendered, and racial wealth gap that's happening and inequality that's happening in our society. The Chicago Foundation for Women started the Inglewood Women's Initiative in 2017 after working with the community, and the community created a quality of life plan. One of the main objectives of the Inglewood Women's Initiative is to increase and strengthen women's economic mobility and security. The goal is to increase their salary to over $40,000 in income, which is significant. Many of the women, when we began the initiative, were unemployed or had salaries below $10,000. Currently, there are 12 organizations involved in the collaboration to support the Inglewood Women's Initiative. But over the course of the initiative, we've had as many as 16 organizations participate. In early 2020, Chicago Foundation for Women's Inglewood Women's Initiative was selected to participate as part of the Women's Economic Mobility Hub with the Women's Funding Network. One of the brightest spots for us really has been this learning around advocacy and seeing the great examples from the other women's funds as a part of the initiative, and for ourselves to really grow and learn from that. It's really inspiring. Being part of the Women's Economic Mobility Hub and the work with WFN has really been an amazing opportunity for Chicago Foundation for Women. And it has opened a number of doors for us to new opportunities, and has given us the ability to tell the story in different ways than we've told the story previously before. So it's just been great. As we enter into our 5th year in the initiative, we're adding new partners, and we're really excited. We have added a partner to provide furniture, donated furniture, a house full of furniture for families that have been impacted by eviction. We are excited to really think about employers and pivot from frontline work to work that can be, because of COVID, work that can be delivered remotely. And so what career fields like computers or computer technicians or those types of things that the women can do remotely while they also manage their families and other needs. I was a little girl on the south side of Chicago from public housing, and my mother had not graduated high school. And so every day I am reminded of my own little girl self, and I am reminded of the investments that made it possible for me to be the first person in my family to go to college and to get a college degree. And I love that we can do that for other little girls across our city, across our country, so that they too can reach their full potential.
The Moms from Education to Employment program was launched in 2014 as a pilot at a local community college. We began with Niagara County Community College and then advanced to Erie County Community College and to Jamestown Community College, where the partnerships have been a learning opportunity for all of us and have resulted in increased retention of single mothers and ultimately to graduation and into family-sustaining jobs so they can lift their entire family out of poverty. The West New York Women's Foundation was selected by the Women's Funding Network to be part of the Women's Economic Mobility Hub work in 2020. This gave us an opportunity to take a model that we knew worked, that we had the data that proved the success of retention and ultimately family-sustaining jobs, and apply it to a workforce certification, shorter term, but still high wage, high demand job opportunity. We partnered with programs that provide workforce certification programs in a very supportive environment, Buffalo Center for Arts and Technology and Harvest House initially, to provide the education program while we provided the support program from the MOMS model. We provide an achievement coach that is there to address the barriers that a woman faces day to day, but also to be someone who believes in these women. That is so important and so void in many of their lives.
In my role as the achievement coach, there are a lot of things that I do. Number one, I build trust and relationships with the women, but I also link them to resources in the community if they need it, working with them on developing skills that maybe they don't have. I also work with other programs and businesses to bring add value services, such as financial literacy if they need it, or learning about resume writing. All these things are also very important to the work. One of the biggest things is the part about systems change, and that deals with partnering with employers to educate them and inform them about the needs of the women. Trauma is 24/7 for them. And so it's very important that institutions that provide education are mindful of the needs of these women. Not just physical needs, not just social supports like financial assistance or housing assistance, but also that social emotional support. If we can create opportunities for these parents, and not only create opportunities, but provide them with add value services and support and wraparound so they can take the wealth that they are gaining right now and help them grow that for their children, then that means that their children will be able to also work towards breaking that cycle of poverty.
In this first year, despite the struggles of the pandemic for so many women in our community, we have been able to elevate over 100 women through workforce certification programs with the supports that they individually need to stay in the program and then to graduate. Before the pandemic, Buffalo was experiencing a once-in-a-lifetime renaissance. We know that it's really important that if that renaissance is going to continue after the pandemic, that all boats must rise. Through this work, we hope to create a movement where these women are successful, where they believe in themselves, where they begin to open the doors to this success to their friends and their family. A movement for Buffalo that lifts all women, that lifts all boats.
In 2018, the Women's Foundation of Arkansas commissioned a report entitled The Economic Indicators of Women in Arkansas, State, Region, and County. One thing that we weren't looking for was business ownership, but it was an indicator in our research report. And that particular indicator jumped off the page because when you look at Arkansas as a state, you could actually see this high concentration of businesses owned by women in the Arkansas Delta, which is known to be one of the most economically depressed parts of our country, not just our state, our country. And so we wanted to understand who are these women and what are they doing that isn't translating into economic mobility. And another nuance of that was that it wasn't just only women concentrated in this part of the state, it was Black women. In all racial ethnic categories, men outpace women in business ownership except for one. Black women in Arkansas own 60% of businesses compared to their male counterparts. We started seeing a disconnect in the services that were offered and the needs on the ground. And so what we did in the design of our pilot model was really look at the top rated items that women of color said that they are looking for in the forms of support, what their challenges were. The Women's Foundation of Arkansas was selected to join the Women's Funding Network's Regional Economic Mobility Hub pilot in the summer of 2020. The concept is to learn from our women business owners, how do we need to better work for you? If you're operating in the gray economy and you are serving your community, how do we help bridge you to the systems that aren't serving you better?
The Women's Economic Mobility Hub brings together a cohort of 10 to 15 women over the course of the next 6 months in order to provide technical assistance and training to help grow their businesses. I am helping to lead women through this process, helping to connect them to other women business owners, and ultimately really hoping to connect them to larger networks such as the banking system to help them hopefully receive capital or any other services that they need. It's really about the networking and connecting these Black women business owners to a larger system of other Black women who are there to help support and provide some sort of guidance. One of the unique aspects about the Women's Economic Mobility Hub is really we're letting the women drive and lead the program. And so each step of the way, they will be providing feedback and data to help us figure out what works and what doesn't work. They have great ideas. They are helping communities because they are job creators. They are showing the next generation what to do because they are mothers. They are forces in the community, and I want them to walk away knowing that there are other Black women who are walking in lockstep with them side by side, and that together we can be a powerful force to change the business community, not only in Arkansas, but worldwide.
If you want the state to be successful on a national economy and a global economy, then you need to have a strategy to include half of its population. And when we look around, we see we're the only ones really taking that banner and constantly investing in what does women's economic security look like, what does the economic development look like, and it's through partnerships with Women's Funding Network that we're really at the forefront of information and innovation across the country that we can bring to Arkansas, make it our own, and make women successful in our state.
The Maine Women's Fund was selected to be one of 9 economic mobility hubs as part of a national program with the Women's Funding Network in 2020. Maine Women's Fund was able to leverage this funding by taking the story of our collaboration with Wabanaki Public Health and sharing it and helping others to engage in conversations around what racial justice might look like and the power of women standing together across races.
What's so important about a lot of the support that they've been able to connect us to is much of that support is flexible funding. It allows us to do things differently. The Maine Women's Fund has been our champion. They are so proud of the work that we're doing, and they believe in our work so deeply that they have been our advocates out in the community talking about our work. So when it comes to our communities, our tribal nations, and our tribal citizens, there are a number of things that are still challenges for us. Clean water is not something that is available. We also understand the challenges of food sovereignty, food security. It is no secret that substance use disorder has impacted Indigenous populations and all populations across the country, and certainly here in Maine. One big area of focus is childcare and creating an Indigenous place for our children and families to connect to services and to heal and thrive. The other area is creating Indigenous talking circles for our women. One of the key priorities for Wabanaki Public Health and Wellness is the creation of the Center for Wabanaki Healing and Recovery. We are actively working on developing a whole continuum of services for women, their families, that will allow for healing no matter what services are needed. If they need childcare services, we have a place for you. If you need supports that connect you to the earth, growing vegetables, we have a farm, we have a place for you. If you need to be on Mount Katahdin, a healing place for us as Wabanaki people, we have a guide ready to take you there. If you want to go down the rapids of the sacred Penobscot River, a traditional river of one of our tribal nations, the Penobscot Nation here in Maine, we also have a guide to do that for you. That's what the hub has created, is this rapid container of innovation, solution, problem solving, and provided some excitement in that we can solve our own community challenges.
Women's funds are the best creators of social change because they have never been able to invest in patriarchal structures, because those structures have always excluded women. And I think that our partnership with Wabanaki Public Health and Wellness is allowing us to take that to the next level. So it's not only choosing not to invest in the patriarchy, but it's choosing to invest in the matriarchy.
Philanthropy means love of humankind, or in our case, womankind. Therefore, when we were developing our strategic plan in 2017, we spent a year meeting with key community members and stakeholders, but we also did a broad statewide survey that involved 1,300 individuals, and we asked them what they felt was most important for us to address. What we learned was that 9 out of 10 single mothers of color specifically are unable to meet the needs of their families. This led us to develop the WAGES program. WAGES stands for, and I love this acronym, WAGES stands for Women Achieving Greater Economic Security. A strength of the WAGES program was bringing together 15 direct service and 8 public policy organizations. As a result, they informed each other. Public policy proposals became stronger because they were informed by the lives of women and their families. We improved individual lives, and we also moved that forward to create systemic change for all 2.9 million women in the state of Colorado. The Women's Foundation of Colorado was honored to be selected in early 2020 to join the Women's Funding Network's Economic Mobility Hub. The Women's Economic Mobility Hub supported all aspects of our programming, our WAGES cohort of public policy and direct service, as well as our research. We use research as an underpinning of all of our programming, recognizing that those data points are people, just as our nonpartisan public policy is about people and not politics. being able to come together and have other sister thought partners help to deepen and enhance our work and to give us the courage to continue to move forward into our current evolution. Our current strategic framework that was just unanimously approved by our Board of Trustees now focuses on gender, racial, and economic equity. This is a part of that evolution of our wages program and the learnings that we shared as a part of the Women's Economic Mobility Hub. One of the outcomes of our work through the wages program that was supported by the Women's Economic Mobility Hub was that we were able to move the economic status of approximately 950 women and close to 2,000 of their family members to different levels. It means that those families that were living on the economic edge and perhaps unable to feel secure about fulfilling their family's basic needs were now better able to do so today and tomorrow. Their pathways are now more clear for the future. I believe that as a result of our participation through the Economic Mobility Hub, that we are more brave, more strong, and more prepared to not only meet current needs, but also the future needs of our mission, and more importantly, of our state and of the women who live within it.
The Iowa Women's Foundation, through our research, learned that 70% of Iowa's female head of households were struggling economically. 70%. 40% were living below the federal poverty line, and another 30% were the working poor, or those women who were trying really, really hard to make ends meet, but for one reason or another, they just couldn't. We convened to the table stakeholders and we asked why. Why are women and girls struggling for economic self-sufficiency in your community? As a result of our community conversations and research, the Women's Foundation discovered that there were 6 barriers to economic success for women in our state: employment, childcare, housing, education and training, transportation, and mentorship. We looked at the research in more detail, and what we learned was that 1 in 2 children were going without access to quality, affordable childcare. There was a shortfall of almost 350,000 slots all across our state, and 24% of our communities were living in a childcare desert. The Women's Foundation, with its community partners, established the Building Community Childcare Solutions Collaborative. This collaborative is now a network of communities all across the state working together to identify the best possible, viable, doable solutions for their communities to increase the availability of quality, affordable childcare. Because childcare is a large issue, and the way to address it is going to be different from community to community, we created a toolkit that communities can use to identify the most viable, doable solution for them to move their work forward. In early 2020, the Iowa Women's Foundation was selected to participate in the Women's Funding Network Economic Mobility Project. Participating in the Women's Economic Mobility Hub enabled the foundation to expand our capacity and our engagement of communities all across the state, working to increase the availability of quality, affordable childcare. We have also been able to produce additional tools that the communities can use while they're working on their solutions. For example, we have a child care center in a box. We have an after-school program in a box. We have shared services. We have shared staffing. Really just different tools that have been identified that now can be used by all of the communities. The Building Community Childcare Solutions work started with our 8 original communities who identified childcare as a priority. We grew from there to 15, then we went to 30, and now as a part of the Mobility Hub, we are at 40. The Iowa Women's Foundation is honored to be a part of the Governor's Child Care Task Force. We believe the governor chose the Iowa Women's Foundation to be a part of this task force because of our extensive work around the state and because we're seen as a leader who can get things done. We don't just want to put a Band-Aid on the symptoms, we really want to look at what's causing these issues and how can we address them so we don't have to deal with it again in the future.
The community that we're working in, zip code 38126, is one of the most impoverished areas. 87% are African American, and most of them are led by women of color. So the Women's Foundation decided to develop and activate our Vision 2020 plan. And Vision 2020 was simply to reduce poverty by 5% in 5 years in zip code 38126. The process that we identified to really look at the challenges in the zip code 38126 was to first understand what their needs are by asking them. And then looking at the lessons that we've learned in our grant making over the last 20 years, as well as our partnerships. The Women's Foundation for Greater Memphis was one of 9 selected in 2020 to participate in the Women's Funding Network, Women's Economic Mobility Hub. As a part of this work and as a part of the partnership with the Women's Funding Network, we were able to create a hub council, if you will, an economic council that really helped the community and our partners understand that we must take a dive-in approach to the work. In communities, mostly impoverished communities, it's a family connection. And that family extends. Through the Women's Economic Mobility Hub, the Women's Foundation has been able to advance from just 2 generations to what we call a 3-generation approach. It includes wraparound support services, support for youth development, early education, and early child care, specifically more youth development, and also financial literacy. But most importantly, there's a component for workforce and work training, as well as employment opportunities. One of the economic data sets that we are really very proud of is that the average household has improved from about 13,000 to now 18,000. In collecting the data through the Economic Mobility Hub, we have a closer view, not only of the numbers, but also the people engaged. And so it's very important that the impact is both qualitative as well as quantitative for the Women's Foundation, especially during these times where there's a lack of actual in-person engagement. And it's allowed us to share our story, elevate that within the community, but also on a national level. Connecting that national and local challenge really engage not only individuals, but other corporations and foundations to support our work. We are working on our Vision 2025 plan, and that would be to expand our model of place-based work, including comprehensive case management, opportunities for employment, early child care, as well as youth development programs and financial literacy into 5 communities by 2025. We believe with the support and work through the Economic Mobility Hub, as well as the models of lessons learned with our grantee partners, we will be able to achieve this aggressive goal.
We have among the highest number of nonprofit organizations per capita in the entire nation. That number is then compounded for women and then again for mothers that are living here in Arizona. I mean, if you're looking at the bigger picture, you're looking at least 500,000 mothers and their families that are living on the margins. And we just have a lot of work to do to eradicate that here. Our goal here in Arizona is to work with moms to get to that place where they're at the worthy wage so that they're out of that cycle and they don't have to depend on public benefits and they never have to go back and think about, well, what am I going to do now with my family? So when the Women's Foundation of Southern Arizona is looking at women in particular, mothers in particular, and their families, we like to utilize a 2-generational framework. And so when we're doing our work, we're not just looking at mom, but we're looking at her whole family. And what we found is that a lot of times if mom is interested in going back to school to further her education, to get into a career track, for that worthy wage, the missing piece there was in large part that access to childcare. And so when we found that pattern over and over and over among families, we knew that that was the crux of the issue and that was something that we needed to address. We really wanted to focus on how can we rebuild the workforce with women in mind. And we've identified around 36 career tracks that are going to be doing well. And in large part, those careers are in the STEM field. So in putting all of these pieces together and recognizing what some of those challenges were when we were doing the research here in the community, the Pathways for Single Mothers pilot program was born. And so what that program does is it's a wraparound holistic services program for women and their children. We help mom get into an educational program with our local community college, and that certificate will then take her to one of those career tracks that we've identified that provides her and her family a worthy wage job so that they don't have to look back to those public benefits ever again. The Pathways for Single Mothers program was selected to be part of the Women's Economic Mobility Hub in early 2020. Being part of this project has helped our work grow tremendously. We've been able to increase capacity in our staff. We've been able to increase our knowledge base around best practices through the learning groups that we have together. We've gone from 1 cohort to 2 for the Pathways program. When we first launched this pilot program, it was a cohort of 10 women. And now we're entering class 2 and we're talking about a cohort of 40 women, which we're really excited about. And when you're talking about, again, the compositions of these families, we're not just helping the 40 women, but we're helping the 40 women and their children. So we're looking at nearly 200 to 300 people that we're helping become self-sufficient through this particular project. With the funding that we received for this program, we were also able to leverage that through other national funders, and we raised an additional $2.6 million to be able to provide these resources to our program participants. Our long-term goal for a program like this is to be written into the state budget. We've proven that it works. And in proving that it works, we demonstrated that for every family that gets out of the cycle of poverty and no longer has to be on public benefits is saving the state of Arizona $20,000 every year. In the long term, you're looking at millions of dollars that Arizona can reallocate to other programs, or perhaps allocating it to this specific program to continue to get families out of the cycle of poverty. And so again, big dreams, long-term goals for us is not only to be able to scale it across the state, but also to be written into the state budget as something that can create a long-term support system for women and their families.
Alabama is at a crossroads as a state. We are facing significant workforce challenges. And sort of the lens that the Women's Fund of Greater Birmingham has brought to this work is that women are a targeted part of the state's solution for workforce challenges. We have important work that we have incubated and know how to do at an incredible level to drive economic mobility. So when I think about the context of the work that we are doing in the state of Alabama, think about this. 20% of women in our state live below the poverty line. If you add in women with children, that is more than half, in fact, more than 60% of single women with children live below the federal poverty line. The Women's Fund of Greater Birmingham has been in this space of economic mobility for over 8 years, and we have utilized very successfully and effectively Aspen Institute's two-generation model. One of our earlier successes was with Jefferson State Community College. We see community colleges as economic and social hubs to help really ground this work and center this work with important wraparound supports. And their partnership with Head Start delivers this perfect model of two-generation approach where women and children are both getting high-quality educational opportunities at the exact same time.
The Women's Fund of Greater Birmingham's student-parent success model is really centered in providing job training for in-demand fields. A cohort of 10 to 15 women go to class together and are supported by a student success coach. Wraparound supports are key and include things like childcare, transportation, economic assets, health and well-being supports, as well as access to jobs.
The Women's Fund of Greater Birmingham has been a part of the Women's Funding Network's Economic Mobility Hub since 2020. It's been exceptional progress for our work and not thinking about it in a vacuum. We've been able to leverage those resources and do the work even better, even bigger, and even bolder.
State of Alabama has an attainment goal of 500,000 skilled workers by 2025. To meet that goal, Alabama needs women. The Women's Fund is partnering with community colleges to implement our student-parent family success model. And that model is centered in providing in-demand training for jobs that are needed in Alabama in fields such as manufacturing, IT, healthcare, with those short-term credentials that are critical to fill those roles. According to our research, we know that women in Alabama are underfunded and underpaid. It is really critical that these skilled jobs have high wages with benefits attached. Our model has seen a lot of success, and that really is attracting employers to the table. Employers are realizing that the model is leading to a strong workforce that they need. And so we have realized that by partnering with employers from the beginning, that there's more success because those jobs are already built into the model.
And now the question and the work begins on how do we take this and make it statewide? And so that is where the power of advocacy has really come into play. So since our partnership with the Women's Funding Network, we have been able to secure over $1.2 million in state appropriations to actually drive this work forward. And that is success.